Maher thought he could throw a subtle jab and move on. But Jasmine Crockett's calm, devastating response turned the entire room and the internet upside down. The dressing room at CBS Television City in Los Angeles was cold. Not physically cold, but distant, like a space that had been polished so many times it forgot people had to sit in it. Jasmine Crockett sat still, elbows on the armrest, her phone screen dimming in her palm. A young assistant had just walked out, politely reminding her she had 10 minutes before she was on real time with Maher. She took a breath, not to calm nerves. This wasn't her first time on national TV, but something about this one felt off. Maybe it was the call she'd gotten 2 days ago from her comms director, who said the tone of the invitation felt loaded. They're calling it a discussion on polarization and civility, her comms director had warned. But if Maher goes where I think he might, they're going to bait you. Just be ready. Jasmine hadn't answered right away. She was used to panels that started with handshakes and ended with smirks. This wasn't new. What was new was the silence when she arrived. No one asked if she needed water. No one introduced her to the other guest. She could hear muffled voices from the hallway, laughs that stopped when she stepped into the green room earlier. She didn't need confirmation. She had it already. Her assistant, leaned through the door. 2 minutes Jasmine stood, adjusted her blazer, powder blue, clean lines, no flash, and looked at herself in the mirror. No cracks, no room for them. Not here. As they walked toward the set, she passed the familiar wall of black and white portraits, the so-called icons. Men in suits, men with opinions, men who had never had to measure their tone for fear of being called angry on cable TV. When she reached the stage, she gave Maher a polite smile. He nodded just barely and gestured toward her seat like he was holding back a joke only he got. The lights came up, the applause sign blinked, the theme song played, and just like that, they were live. Maher leaned in, half grinning. Our next guest is a rising Democratic congresswoman from Texas. She's young, sharp, and possibly the future of the party, unless emotion gets in the way. The audience chuckled just a bit. Jasmine tilted her head slightly, not in confusion, but calculation. She crossed her legs, hands calmly folded. Good to be here, she said, voice steady. Maher gave a tight smile. Let's start simple. Why do so many progressives these days feel the need to moralize everything? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she blinked slowly and gave a slight nod, like she'd been expecting this exact line. But what happened next wasn't anger. It was something else. Something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous to anyone who thought they could handle her. Jasmine leaned forward just slightly. Not enough to signal confrontation, but just enough to take up space. She kept her voice light. Moralizing, huh? I think you mean standing up for people who don't usually get heard. Maher smirked, right? But don't you think that sometimes passion gets in the way of governing? There's a lot of yelling, not a lot of results. It's like everyone's trying to go viral instead of get things done. A couple people in the audience chuckled again. That kind of polite, awkward laugh you hear when no one's quite sure if it's a joke or a jab. Jasmine didn't smile. I get it, she said calmly. Young people, especially young women, especially young black women, get labeled emotional when we care too much or angry when we speak directly. Meanwhile, someone else can lose their temper, curse on air, and it's passion. Interesting, isn't it? Ma shifted in his seat. You're making this about identity. I'm talking about approach. People want solutions, not lectures. And I'm telling you, Jasmine replied, that you can't separate identity from approach. If someone spends their life watching their communities get overlooked, underfunded, and blamed for problems they didn't create, what do you expect them to sound like when they finally get the mic soft? The tension thickened. The audience quieted, not out of discomfort, but anticipation. Maher raised an eyebrow. But isn't that the problem? The mic's become a weapon instead of a tool. Every moment's a chance to clap back. I mean, it's almost like Congress is a stage now. Jasmine chuckled. Not because it was funny, but because the setup was too easy. You know what's wild? She said, it has always been a stage. You just never noticed when the same people were writing every act. Now that someone new is reading from the script, suddenly it's performative. Someone in the crowd said, under their breath. Others began nodding. The camera didn't cut away. It lingered on May's face. He reached for his water. Okay, okay. So, let's take the emotion out of it. Policy-wise, what's actually being done? That depends, Jasmine said. Do you mean what's being proposed or what's being blocked? He tilted his head. Explain. She did. Let's take voting rights. I helped draft language that would have made it easier for working people to vote. More polling places, stronger mail-in options, protections for people with disabilities. That's not emotional. That's structural. But every time we bring it up, someone accuses us of overreaching. So I'm asking, who's really holding progress back? Maher shrugged. Maybe it's just not that simple. No, she said plainly. It is that simple. What's complicated is trying to justify keeping systems that work for some people while pretending they work for everyone. The audience began to murmur. This wasn't the standard exchange they were used to. No punchlines, no forced laughs, just two people circling something deeper, and only one of them looked comfortable in it. Maher crossed one leg over the other and gave a tight smile. Sounds like a good soundbite. Jasmine didn't blink. Maybe. Or maybe it just sounds different because I didn't need to raise my voice to make the point. But Maher wasn't done, and Jasmine knew it. What came next wasn't a question. It was a swing. Maher leaned back in his chair, the smile slipping into something colder. Calculated, his fingers tapped the armrest once, then again. Well, he said slowly, you talk a lot about how hard it is for women like you. But isn't part of leadership being able to take criticism without calling it oppression? The sentence landed heavy, not because it was loud, not because it was clever, but because it carried that smug undercurrent that said, you're not allowed to call this what it is. For a moment, Jasmine didn't respond. She looked at him. Really looked, not like a sparring partner, like a man who was asking a question he already thought he had the answer to. Then she turned slightly toward the audience. Not in a grand theatrical way, just enough to acknowledge them. She didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't blink more than usual. But her voice, it changed. It slowed down, sharpened. Let me ask you something, she said quietly. If I sit here and explain why certain systems push people to the margins, and your first instinct is to say I'm playing victim, what does that say about how you listen? Silence. Real silence. No coughs, no whispers, no chuckles. She kept going. I'm not oppressed because someone disagrees with me. I'm pointing out a pattern. And the moment I name that pattern, suddenly the conversation shifts to whether I'm being too sensitive, not whether the pattern exists. That's not debate. That's deflection. The camera cut to March. His expression faltered. Not much, just a flicker, but enough. That small sliver of time where someone realizes they might not be as in control of the narrative as they thought. Jasmine stayed steady. And let's be real, she continued. You've built a career saying the uncomfortable thing. You pride yourself on pushing back against the mainstream. But when a black woman does the same thing, when she challenges you directly, you don't call it brave, you call it emotional. A woman in the audience clapped, then another, then half the room. Maher lifted his hand, trying to wave them down with a smirk that didn't quite land. All right, let's keep it civil. Jasmine turned back to him, calm as ever. I am being civil, she said. I'm just not being small. That line cracked the air. It wasn't delivered with fire. It didn't need it. That's what made it hit harder. It was the truth behind it. The years packed into that one sentence. The restraint, the sharpness. It wasn't just a response. It was a correction, a boundary freshly drawn. Maher couldn't spin that one. For a beat, he sat back and let out a short breath. Part scoff, part surrender. He tried to recover, reaching for his notes, but his hands moved just a little faster than before, like he'd lost rhythm. And the crowd knew it. Not because they were on Jasmine's side, but because, for once, the story in front of them wasn't being filtered through sarcasm or spectacle. It was two worlds clashing, and the quieter one was winning. Jasmine didn't push further. She didn't need to. She sat back, adjusted her blazer slightly, and waited for the next question. But the real shift wasn't what she said. It was what happened next when the show ended and the world started talking. The credits had barely finished rolling when Ree rushed into the dressing room with wide eyes and Jasmine's phone in his hand. You're trending. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. She peeled off her microphone. Already number 2 on X and climbing. She took the phone from him. Mentions were flooding in. Some were screenshots. Others were clips, just 15 seconds long, showing that one moment. I'm not being small. It was looping, edited into GIFs, memes, overlaid with dramatic music, typed out in white bold font under the words, "Say that again." She exhaled through her nose.